So here's the variable challenge. We want you to create 3 variables and change their value. If you're so inclined to do a little bit more work, make the variables different types. So make one string, one make numeric, and the other a Boolean, so true or false. If you're confused, go ahead and check out the next lecture where we'll solve it together. Let's talk about type annotations. According to Apple, type annotations allow us to declare a constant or a variable to be clear about the kind of values the constant or variable can store. So we see here at our bottom example here, we have var welcome message : string. And we said that strings before were just a bunch of characters surrounded by quotes. And what we're specifying here is that the variable welcome message will hold a string. So let's go ahead and just take a look at an analogy of a type annotation. It's like a placeholder that can never change. So when we say that it's going to be of type string or of type int, and that was our whole numbers, or a bool for booleans, true or false, we're basically specifying that type for that name. But we don't necessarily need to give it an immediate value. So we can kind of say that it's a little bit of a blueprint in that it's going to go ahead and set up or help us start figuring out what it should be, but we don't immediately have to assign a value. And we see that we didn't assign a value in the previous example, or last slide here. We didn't have an equal sign. We didn't assign it a value. We just simply said that it was going to be of this specific type. So if you're confused, type annotations really are not too bad, I promise. Let's go ahead and just jump right over to the example. So flip over to the next lecture and you'll start seeing how we can start using our own type annotations in code. For this language feature, we're going to be learning that we can create multiple constants and multiple variables on the same line. Does that sound pretty simple? Well, it is, I promise. So in order to get started, we're just going to jump right into Xcode and we're going to get started with a playground. We don't need a full keynote production. So let's go ahead and just call this multi-line variables and constants. And we'll go ahead and just press next. And we can create this right on our desktop here. That's fine. The first thing we do is we always just remove this line of code here. We don't need that. And let's go ahead and first show you how to create multiple constants on a single line. So let's just say, for example, this is going to be the theme of test results. Let's go ahead and say that for our first answers correct, we can set that equal to 23. Now, if there's a constant for the answers correct, there's probably a constant for the answers incorrect. So rather than doing that on another line, we can just do comma, and then we're going to say answers incorrect, and set that equal to 10. So what's going on here? Well, in the past, what we would have had to have done would have been something like this. And we would have just written this on 2 different lines, and this has the same result. All we're doing here is we're just doing something to change this visually a little bit and reduce the number of lines of code we have. So you said making things abbreviated is generally better. Having less lines of code is also generally a better thing. So if we're going to create multiple constants, and in this case, it's even better because the constants are related. In this case, our test results, it's great to do it all in one line. The real reason I want to show this to you is that you might see this if you're reading other people's code. And I don't want you to be confused by this. I want you to know that it is possible to write these out in a single line. If you want to stick to writing it in multiple lines, that's completely fine as well. So we can also do this with variables. Let's go ahead and just set up something like report grade. And incidentally, if you're curious, what I'm doing here is just a comment. This has no effect on the computer program, and we'll have a whole mini series on comments as well. But basically, this is just a little bit of a note for ourselves. So anytime we add 2 forward slashes, this has no effect on the computer program. So Apple includes one here. They tell us what the playground is, and we're now defining test results and report grade. So don't be confused by that. You could remove this, and it would be exactly the same bits of code that we're going to be writing. This is just a nice identifier for us. So we can say report grade. And the important thing here is we're going to be able to create multiple variables on the same line. So we're going to say var incomplete guide, or excuse me, incomplete grade. And let's set this to be incomplete. And we'll do something like current score, and we'll set this equal to 0. So let's say we haven't yet submitted our final report for the class. It's worth 60% of our total grade. A lot of universities seem to have crazy grading things like that. And as a result, our grade is currently incomplete. And we see here that one cool thing in multi-line is that we don't need to have these be the same type. Our first element is a string here. Incomplete grade is equal to a string, and current score is equal to a number. But they're both variables, right? So once again, this would be the same thing as writing var incomplete grade equals incomplete, and var current score equals 0. We can just combine those and add our comma here, and that will go ahead and say current score is also a variable. There's one other thing I want to show you, and it's the idea that we can't mix and match constants with variables. So let's go ahead and try to write something like let I want my Game Boy, and we'll just use a Boolean here. We'll say equals true, and then we'll do var will get it equals who knows question mark. We'll see that this is not a legal way to write code. And if we click here, it says var cannot appear nested inside another var or let pattern. All right, so what it's saying here is I can't use two different types here. So if I remove this, they'll both be constants. That's fine. If I switch this over to a var, we'll see that that's fine as well. But we can't mix and match these. We can't put let here. That is not legal. So just keep that in mind as you're writing code, that if you do multiple variables or constants in a single line, that's fine, but they have to be the same type. If you want to save this to remind yourself that this is not allowed, just add 2 forward slashes and this becomes a comment. And we see that it no longer throws an error because this has no effect on our computer program.
Hey guys, so we're going to start learning about the Swift language. And I just wanted to go over a few of the cool things that are available in Swift 2.0. Before we get to that, I just want to quickly explain to you, in case you don't know, what is a programming language and what is Swift? Well, a programming language is the way in which we talk to our computer. So we're going to see that a programming language allows us to have a different organized set of ways in which we can talk to our computer and have our computer do specific things. So what can that entail? Well, it could say like, I want to store a bit of information. I want you to do something a certain amount of times, or I just want to kind of package this information and I'll come back for it later. And it's just a few things a programming language allows us to accomplish. And I also want to mention that in many ways, a programming language is not like learning a foreign language. So there's a lot of similarities, but we're going to be writing our stuff in English, and as much as you can, you want your code to read like English. So in many ways, it's just kind of learning a bit of logic and kind of learning the system in which we can organize our logic. Learning language is actually not the worst thing in the world. What takes a lot of time in any programming language is when you have to start learning the framework. And that's what we've really been focusing on so far, in terms of learning things like how do I show a button on a screen? Well, that's included in the framework. That's not part of the programming language. So the framework is what's huge. It's really expansive, and it allows us to skip a lot of work. We don't have to write all this stuff over in the language. Someone's gone through and kind of predefined it for us. So an analogy, this isn't a perfect analogy, but you can kind of think of the programming language like all of the letters you would learn in an alphabet. That's not so difficult. But then when you have to learn all of the words in the English language, or enough words to communicate, that's what takes time. And that's what a framework is, in my opinion. It's just pre-written, predefined things, and the language is how you learn how to read that. So the language, again, if you think about it like English, right? Like learning your alphabet, kind of learning the sounds. Yeah, that takes some time for sure. And it's not the easiest thing in the world, especially if it's your second language. But learning all of the words and their definitions and how to use them, that's what takes a ton of time. So we're going to go through the language together. And that's going to be super awesome. We are going to have a ton of challenges and different ways for you to practice learning language. And then you're going to be able to see the language applied to, projects and kind of see, okay, what are we actually going to do with this stuff? So Swift 2.0, well, it's a really huge announcement that Apple's making. And it's really cool because it's going to I think it's really going to shift kind of the way in which we program apps and just the popularity of the Swift programming language. It's really cool because it's brand new. It replaced Objective-C for those of you who don't know. And Objective-C was a superset of C. So you could use all of C in Objective-C, and C is just old. It's like one of the original big ones, So Swift fixes a lot of the issues. It adds a ton of flexibility. You can kind of code multiple ways, and we'll get into that. It allows itself to be used very carefully in many ways. It has some really great error checking. And here we see it's actually going to be open source, which is just massive. Being open source will hopefully allow Swift to continue to be improved by the community at large. So hopefully people will make it awesome, and I'm pretty sure they will. People love their Apple and Mac stuff. And more than that, I'm hoping it'll encourage the Swift language to be used for other things than just like iOS apps, like making iPhone and iPad apps. So I'm really hoping people might write servers or just do crazy stuff in Swift. I mean, we'll have to see what happens, but that would be really awesome. So for those of you learning Swift now, I'm really hoping you're going to be able to do more than just make Apple apps, even though that's awesome in the long run. So yeah, open source, that's kind of what it means. People are going to be able to use the language. They're going to be able to contribute to it, hopefully. And one of the really cool things about getting contributions is we're not just waiting on Apple to hand us down this is everything and that's it. As an example where this was an issue, in our last iteration of Swift 1.0 to 2.0, we had a huge gap where the Swift language was just not being improved. And we found out that the reason for that was because that team at Apple was busy working on all the watch stuff. And while the watch stuff was super cool and really awesome, I really like the watch, it was kind of a shame and actually really annoying that some of these Swift things were just not getting fixed fast enough. So yeah, I mean, that's there. I mean, you guys can look at these slides if you want, but there's going to be some new error handling, some availability. So this is really nice. It tells you wow, that API is too new for your target OS. And this has been an issue sometimes. You've had to use if statements and stuff to get around this. It's been a little bit messy. So hopefully this will clean things up for us. Mutability warnings, protocol extension, all this stuff is cool. You can really dig into this stuff if you want. The improved Apple SDKs are really nice. Apple is definitely shifting towards Swift. So there was kind of a question before of should I learn Swift or Objective-C? Because all this code is all this legacy code is written in Objective-C. So if I want to get a job as an iOS developer or iPhone developer, one, I need to know Objective-C. And the fact that Apple's shifting means that I'm hoping a bunch of companies will shift because Swift is just better than Objective-C. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say it. It's a little controversial, but I just prefer Swift. I don't write anything in Objective-C if I can help it anymore. I'm on board. Swift is going to be awesome. It is awesome, and it's going to continue to get more awesome. Just another few small things here. So print line is actually a big change here. It's easy. You just switch over to print and you're good to go. There's a guard keyword. We're going to figure out how to use the guard keyword in the course. And it's going to automatically synthesize headers. And it's not really a big deal anyway. I mean, Apple has been doing this in Objective-C for a really long time. So a lot of people were just expecting that. It was kind of a weird when you had to do imports yourself. So global, doing the class imports is actually already really easy, and it just got easier. So that's Swift 2.0 in a really quick kind of run through, and just kind of what Swift is in a really quick run through. If you've coded in Swift before, I apologize if I've wasted any of your time, But I think it's really cool, and I'm excited to really delve into it. This course is really going to get into the nitty gritty of Swift, and at the end, you should be a Swift master.
So we have a challenge, and this challenge is meant to have you play with constants. So it should be very straightforward when you go ahead and create a new playground project. In that playground project, I would like you to create 3 constants, and I'd also like you to prove to yourself that their value cannot change. So we had that practice in our last lecture where we showed that we couldn't change the value or update the value of the string. And I want you to go through, just try it, and then see that you can't change the value of a constant. And we also want you to make sure that you're using different types of constants. For example, we had a string, we had a numeric number, and if you want to, go ahead and try using remember that a bool or boolean can be true or false. So we have another challenge for you. We want you to practice using print. Now this might seem super easy, super obvious, but print is once again one of the most important functions you're going to use as you write your own computer programs and really start to learn how to code on your own. So we want you to create and print out 5 variables and constants. Make sure you use the print command without arguments, regular usage to print them out with a new line at the end. And also use the print method that we showed you to remove the new line at the end as well. So you can practice both styles of print. And if you're confused, if you want to check out what's going on, how we did it, definitely check out the solution lecture in the next lecture.